Welcome to Module 4. Good news. This is the last module in the unit. Bad news, you got a test coming. Also bad news, Unit 1, time period 1, and time period 9 are the two shortest time periods, and they only account for 5% of the test material. So, yeah. Our next unit will be much longer. Don't get too used to it. So, but let's go on and let's finish up Unit 1 with Module 4. All right, so what have we looked at so far? We've looked at geography. We've looked at Native Americans. We've looked at the political situation in Europe leading to the discovery of the Americas. Now, we're going to talk about the Americas. So, let's delve into it, okay? Today our big question is, what was the impact of the European discovery of the New World? And the focus question is, what were the global benefits and consequences of the discovery of the New World? Okay, let's talk about AP skills before we get into this, as we always do. All right, first thing that you should notice, quotation marks, okay? If there's quotation marks there, then that tells us something about the word. That tells us that there's a little bit of, it's a little bit of a contestment. It's not necessarily a fact that we're dealing with, more of like a point of view, a way of seeing things, and that quotation mark tells us that this is, there's something more here that we should be thinking about. If that word is in quote, if that word's in quotes, and we're not dealing with an actual quote, which is the case here, there's a reason for that. So let's take a look at why the reason is. So, New World and discovery. So the New World, of course, is the Americas. Discovery would be when the Europeans discover it. So why would that be in quotes? Let's think about that. Well, let's first talk about the New World. Okay? Were there people living there? Of course there were. They were Native Americans. Would this world be new to them? Absolutely not. Okay, this is the world they've always known. It is the only world they've known. So, who is this world new to? It's the Native Americans. The same can go for the discovery, right? Europeans are discovering the Americas. This is the first time, well, first documented time with sustained contact that we have interaction between the two hemispheres, between the Eastern and Western Hemisphere. Eastern Hemisphere being Asia, Europe, Africa, Western Hemisphere being the Americas. So this is the first time when the Europeans are going to find it. They didn't know it existed before. And then there's going to be sustained interaction. That interaction is going to have a lot of effects. And basically, the world that we live in today is a net result of the effects of these two worlds, these two halves of the planet coming together for the first time. Now, let's put it out there. Is there evidence that the Vikings had settlements in North America several hundred years before Columbus? Yes, there are. So why aren't we talking about Leif Erikson and Eric the Red as the discoverers of the Americas? Because their settlements didn't take anything. It was they were short-lived, and there was no real sustained contact between the Americans and Europeans, and there was no sustained settlement, no back and forth. Okay, so there's a little bit, but it's not there. When Columbus gets there, that's a major turning point in world history. It's a major turning point because these two continents are now going to be there, they're going to be open, and Europeans are going to know about them, and there's going to start the trade that goes back and forth. Alright, so let's talk about our focus question. What are the global benefits and consequences of the discovery of the New World? Okay. So, this one's pretty straightforward. What good things came out of the discovery of the New World? Now, remember, this is good things. We got to think of multiple people here. How's it good for Europeans? How is it good for Native Americans? How is it good for Africans? And the consequences. Consequences has a more negative connotation. So, what's the bad? Okay? What are the good and bad things that happen as a result of this discovery of the New World? Okay? Just to put this in context, we're working on a bigger thing. So, basically, the lesson today is not going to delve too much into Columbus because we're focusing on the Zinn reading in class, and we're also going to be taking a look at Bartolome de las Casas, and we're also going to be looking at Charles Mann. So combine these lectures with the documents we're looking in class, and that's basically going to set up the stage for the project here that we're going to have, which is the open debate. And that is, you know, what's Columbus's legacy? I mean, should he be remembered as a horrible monster, or, you know, is history too hard on him? That's what we're going to take a look at. All right, so let's take a look at Columbus first. Okay, there's our man, Columbus. Okay, so we talked the last time about how the Portuguese wanted to go out and explore. They wanted to find a way out of the Ottoman stranglehold on trade that existed between East and West. They wanted a quicker route to Asia. They started going down Africa. They finally found a way around the Cape of Good Hope, and they got all the way to India. Now, let me pull up a map of the world. Just a second, so that we can visualize this. Okay, okay, let's take a look at this map. Can I adjust this? Okay, you know what, let's do this. Alright. So, there, you should be able to see it. Alright, so Portugal is right there, tiny little thing on the Iberian Peninsula. Now, this is what the Portuguese were doing. They were going all the way down around Africa to India. Okay? Africa is a gigantic continent. It's huge. So, it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of money. And once the technology had gotten to the point where oceanic travel was successful, once they had the sails, once they had the compass, once they had the astrolabe, and they were actually able to venture out on the oceans, some people start getting some ideas that there may be easier way to do things. Well, Columbus is going to be one of those ideas. Whoops, you don't want that. Columbus is going to be one of these guys that gets the idea that there may be an easier way to do this. So while the Portuguese are sailing south around Africa, he's an Italian, so he's from over here, but the Italians basically laugh him out because they think his idea is great. He goes to Spain. Spain neighbors Portugal. And he appeals to two monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella. Remember last time we talked about how there was a lot of political infighting amongst the Europeans and how they all were basically competing with each other. Well, the two youngest monarchs on the scene in Europe are going to be Ferdinand and Isabella. They just unified Spain. They defeated the Moors, they defeated the Muslims, they kicked them out of the European continent, and they're kind of like the rising stars. So Columbus comes to them with this cockamamie idea. Okay, now you got to remember, Portugal shares the Iberian Peninsula with Spain. So Columbus goes, you know what? I got an idea. Let me sail west. Let me go around. You know, I basically he didn't know that these two continents existed. He knew the world was round. Okay, didn't think the world was flat. Most people by that time knew the world was round. Okay, they knew Africa, they knew Asia was over here, they knew Europe was connected to Asia. So he thought the world was round. So he said, you know what, let me sail west. We know there's a vast ocean here, but we know the world is round, so it won't take me too long, and boom, I'll hit China. Okay, so that's what his plan is. His plan is to go west. And he thinks he can do it. He thinks he can go west and get there. Now, Ferdinand and Isabella are always looking for ways to trump Portugal. They're skeptical of him, so they only give him 3 rinky-dink ships. Nina, the Pinta, Santa Maria. You should remember this moment. And his crew was mostly outfitted from prisoners. Okay, so they're not investing a ton of money into this thing. Okay, they're saying, you know what? If it works, it's great. If not, what are we out? We're out a few old ships and we're out some prisoners. Who cares? So Ferdinand and Isabella financed Columbus's expedition, and he goes off in what this is now what's been dubbed as one of history's most successful failures, or yeah, one of the most successful failures in history, because he was going to discover Asia. He wanted to get to China or India, and instead he stumbles upon some continents. That is why today we still call Native Americans falsely Indians, because Columbus thought he had actually landed in India. He instead landed in the island of Hispaniola. Let's bring our map back up. Hispaniola is where Dominican Republic is today. So basically he goes west and he lands here. He thinks he's over here. Okay, they had some idea about geography, but not too much. So he's here. Now, Columbus is going to go his entire life thinking that he discovered India. He calls them Indians. He goes back on further expeditions, and those further expeditions, he gets to Cuba, he gets to mainland South America, but he never knew it. He, in fact, is going to die thinking that he had been successful in his mission, that he had discovered a faster way to get to India and China. It's not going to be until after, when other explorers and conquistadors start going through, that, wait a minute, you know, there's something different here. This is not China, this is not India. We've got some new continents. And it's going to be a map maker, Italian map maker, Americo Vespucci. That's going to be the first one to actually name them and call it the Americas, North and South America. Alright, so Columbus gets there, and, you know, he's not such a nice guy. He's looking for gold. He realizes that the natives aren't exactly advanced, that he's got more advanced weapons than they have. He sees them coming out naked. You know, he sees they're pagan, they're not Christian. You know, he's fully ready to take advantage of that. He is an opportunist par excellence, and he immediately takes some slaves. He realizes who's boss, and his men take liberties with the women. He orders them to find gold, and basically that's going to start a chain reaction where the Spanish are going to go over, and you know, they're going to start conquering and doing all kinds of horrible stuff to the native people they find. As a matter of fact, we have a word for the Spanish to do that. We call them conquistadors, or conquerors, because their weapons were so far advanced. Now, we should actually say this, that Columbus thought he was going to China, and he was terrified of the Chinese. He had all kinds of letters and everything, because one thing that he did not want is he did not want to get into a fight with the Chinese, because he knew the Chinese would kick the snot out of him. That tells you about power dynamics in the 15th century. But he realizes that the people there are not Chinese, and they're very less advanced than him. So he's definitely going to be an opportunist. Okay, now, in terms of the genocide argument and everything, that's Zin, and that's what our debate is about. But let's talk about the political implications of Columbus discovering the Americas. Okay? Okay, so Portugal and Spain. Once they realized that the land that was discovered is going to be different, is going to be is going to be new continents. Okay, Um, they start getting into a fight. The Portuguese say, "Well, it should be ours," and the Spanish say, "It should be ours." And they go to Pope Alexander VI, the same Pope that we were talking about before, that married off his son and his daughter together. And they say, help us settle this dispute. So the Pope basically draws a line down a map and says, everything to the east of this line is going to be Portugal, everything to the west of this line is going to be Spain. And that's going to be New Spain, New Portugal. They thought the continents were much bigger than they were, so Portugal kind of got the short end of it. Later, they adjusted it, and that is what we now call Brazil. Okay, Brazil became Portuguese, everything else is Spanish. That's why most of Latin America, you have speaking Spanish. All right, so we're going to talk more about how the Spanish treated their colonies later, but let's talk about what emerges. Let's talk about the Colombian exchange. This is important. So, for the first time in history, you have the two continents coming back together, right? This hasn't happened since the last ice age. Now, things have developed very differently on the two of them. Okay, most importantly, you're going to have the exchange of food and animal husbandry, and technology and people and everything else. Okay, they had stuff in the Americas. Wait a minute, I gotta pause this because somebody's here and I don't know who it is. Okay, time out. Okay, sorry about that interruption. Now, let's go back to our Colombian exchange here. All right, so you had the Americas, North and South America, Europe, Asia, and Africa. Europe, Asia, and Africa have been interacting, trading, and sharing stuff for centuries, for millennia. Okay? North and South America, there is going to be some interaction, but we got to remember the north-south layout makes interaction more difficult than the east-west layout of Europe. So there's not going to be as much interaction, but there is going to be interaction and trade, particularly the big crop that they raise, corn. So for the first time, these two worlds are colliding, and what comes out of it is what we call the Colombian exchange. What word do we see in Colombian? Columbus. Okay, it's named after him. Colombian exchange. So, what happens? Well, you have a lot of stuff that was in the New World is going to go to Europe. Okay, particularly foodstuffs, corn, maize, potatoes. Didn't exist in Europe before that. Sweet potatoes and squashes too. Beans, cocoa. You know, cocoa. That's where we get chocolate from. Okay, things like that. Those are going to go to the old world. You're going to have an enormous effect. Okay, the potato, for instance. The potato can grow almost anywhere, and anybody who's eaten a lot of potatoes knows that. Well, you can make it taste a million different ways. You add a couple of different things to it, and it's like you got a different dish. You can fry it, you can saute it, you can boil it, you can bake it, you can do all kinds of stuff to a potato. You put a little butter on it, put sour cream on it, you spice it, whatever. It's going to taste differently any way you do it. It grows anywhere, and a potato is also extremely filling. Okay, it's very dense. It's a real starchy tuber, we call them. Now, that means that there's a lot of calories packed into a potato. And that's going to become the food of the poor in Europe. It's going to be very cheap, very easy to grow, and that's going to do amazing things for European nutrition. It's going to lead to a population explosion in Europe. Corn, the same thing. Corn is a very adaptable crop, can grow in a lot of places. Beans, there's going to be a revolution in Europe, and the diet is going to improve immensely because these things they're pulling over. The wealth of European countries and kings is going to grow exponentially from all of the gold and silver that are stolen from the Americas. And then there's going to be another crop that is going to transform European high society, and that's going to be tobacco. Okay, something that did not exist in Europe before the discovery of the Americas. Now, What comes from the old world goes to the new world. Well, they have a lot of food there that they don't have over here in the Americas. Wheat, for instance, which we use to make bread and a lot of other things. Did not have. Sugar, rice, okay? Spanish folks eating your arroz con pollo. Guess what? Mayans or Tainos did not eat arroz con pollo. There was no arroz. Okay? Coffee beans also go over here. There was no Colombian coffee before the discovery of the Americas. Why? Because coffee comes from Asia. Okay? Livestock. Huge, huge livestock. There was only one domesticated animal in all of the Americas, and that is the alpaca. Okay? It is a variant of the llama. Not exactly going to be a huge beast of burden. Most of the big livestock animals come from Europe. Horses, cows, pigs, okay, oxen, the animals that we use for work and also to eat. A lot of those come from the old world. No horses in the Americas before Columbus got here. He brought the first ones. No cows. There's no such thing as Texas steak, because cows come from Asia, same thing. All right, the other thing, and this is going to be huge, that Columbus and crew are going to bring over are going to be diseases. Because they had this livestock piece, because they had the livestock piece, because Europeans and Asians and Africans had been living in such close proximity to farm animals for so long, they've been exposed to a lot of disease. Most of the diseases, like smallpox, actually started off in farm animals and then made their way into the human population. Over centuries, the populations of Europe and Asia were going to develop some natural immunity to these diseases. And every time there's a disease outbreak, there's always going to be some people that have a natural immunity to them. And those people have babies, and they pass off their immunity onto their offspring, onto their kids. Guess what? Over here, they had no such interaction because they did not have the big farm animals. So that means that they don't have big diseases that make the transition back and forth, with the exception of syphilis, which is some revenge on, some conquistadors that got a little too fresh, but that's another story. So basically, we're going to start to see a 90% die-off of the Native Americans once they're exposed to these diseases, once they have no immunity. Most historians figure that there are about 100 million people in the Americas at the time of the discovery. And after the diseases are going to finish, then it's going to go down to, give or take, 10 million, 90% die-off. That's going to lead to a huge labor shortage in the Americas. And once the Europeans are going to extract all of the gold and silver out of the Americas, they're still going to need some way to make money from them. So what are they going to do? They're going to send labor over here, and basically they're going to turn it into gigantic farm labor. But there's no the Native Americans had died off. They did try the encomienda system, which we'll talk about. But a lot of the Native Americans had died off, so they needed a fresh labor supply to get over here. So what they do, they sent slaves in from Europe, or slaves in from Africa, because the Portuguese had been pioneering with the slave trade, and that was going on. So they were trading finished goods, mostly guns and things like that, to African tribes who were warring against each other, and basically purchasing slaves and sending them over here. So there you have it. For better or for worse, because of the mistake of Columbus, the old world and the new world are together. Stuff from the old world is going to go into the new world. Stuff from the new world is going to go into the old world. Some people are going to win and some people are going to lose. But the Colombian exchange, the exchange of goods, services, and people that began when Columbus discovered these areas, are going to transform the world in a way that is still being felt today. So it's up to us to assess whether that is a good thing or it's a bad thing. Okay, remember your focus question here is pretty straightforward today. What were the global benefits and consequences of the discovery of the New World? And we'll see what your responses are in class tomorrow. Have a great day.